In the beginning there was grid paper, and lo, the mighty master of dungeons touched pen to paper, bringing forth forests, lakes, towns, and castles. He saw the world, and the world was good, and he gave it a name. Oith? The world of Greyhawk, newly made relevant by placing much of the setting within the Dungeon Master's Guide. Let's take a look at this campaign setting for Dungeons & Dragons and see what makes it tick. But first, this video is sponsored by Tales of Fablecraft, a cooperative virtual tabletop RPG set in the vibrant world of Mythos. This is a unique tabletop RPG specially made with the virtual tabletop in mind. It's easy to pick up and play, built-in video, audio, and text chat between players.
Oh, hi! Hey!
Plus, ready-to-play adventures. There's animated artwork, music, and battle effects. Fablecraft uses a D6 style dice pool system for skill checks and attacks. You can download the base game for free, make a character, or run an adventure. Use the link below, and thanks again, Tales of Fablecraft. Hello everybody, Jordan here, the PH is silent. I make lore videos on the worlds of Dungeons & Dragons, so subscribe to be awesome. Now, let's get started. Greyhawk was created and designed by Gary Gygax, one of the fathers of D&D.
Greetings! It's a pleasure to meet you.
Not the first campaign setting for D&D, it did become popular in the 70s and 80s as an introductory setting. Many campaign settings nowadays begin with creating a world map or a creation myth, but those who have created their own settings will tell you most often it is best to start small, with a town or a castle, and expand out as your players explore your setting. And Gary did just that, albeit by happenstance. World of Greyhawk started as a simple dungeon underneath a castle known as Castle Greyhawk. With every adventure, the world got a little bigger, from dungeon to city to forest and eventually world. It's a great tutorial setting to engage in classic medieval fantasy. Now, you might have heard of Orth or Oith. This is the planet of Greyhawk, the planet of the Greyhawk campaign setting. So Orth is to Greyhawk like Teril is to the Forgotten Realms, or Eberron is to Eberron. The origin of Greyhawk is kind of a fun story. So Gygax created the first level of a castle, Castle Greyhawk, for his two children to play in. And they finished that level and went to bed, and he immediately started working on a second level of the dungeon. Now, a month later, after exploring dungeons, he created the nearby city so that player characters could go and sell the treasure and resupply. So Gygax wasn't also a map maker, so instead he utilized the real map of North America, placing his fantasy cities and locations on top of it. Greyhawk itself was situated near Chicago. At first, the players used Norse and Greek gods, but eventually Gygax created a few that were specific to the Greyhawk setting. Over the course of the 1970s, TSR and Gygax released many adventures written in the world of Greyhawk, but the original Castle Greyhawk was never officially published. That first dungeon that he ran for his children and friends never became available to others. Now, I was curious, so I went through, and here are some of the popular and published adventures that are set in the world of Greyhawk. Lost Caverns of Soj Konth, Tomb of Horrors, Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl, Hall of the Fire Giant King, Descent into the Depths of the Earth, Shrine of the Kuatoa, Vault of the Drow, and the Village of Hamlet. In addition, Lawrence Sheik set his 1979 TSR adventure White Plume Mountain in Greyhawk. Oddly enough, Gygax never wanted to publish his Greyhawk setting. He believed the fun and the expectation of D&D is that a dungeon master creates their own world, much like he did. He was surprised that other people were interested in playing a Greyhawk game. He further developed the geography, history, and politics, and by the 1980s, TSR released The World of Greyhawk. Now remember that, it'll be interesting later on. Now, this was a 32-page campaign guide that left fans kind of frustrated that there wasn't more. Gygax did provide further information on Greyhawk in Dungeon magazine articles during the 1980s and with future adventures. such as the Hidden Shrine of Tomoe-chan, Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh, and the Forgotten Temple of Tharsden. It was more work than Gygax could realistically keep up with, though, and TSR started promoting their other popular settings, including Dragonlance. With Gary leaving TSR in 1986, the company shifted away from using Greyhawk and rather focused on their new setting, the Forgotten Realms. But as companies do, they retained the rights to Greyhawk, and in the 1990s, TSR decided to create a tie-in board game along with new Greyhawk Adventures and supplements. Now that run lasted until 1995, where it became clear TSR was not doing well, and by 1996 the company filed for bankruptcy. Suddenly, a new challenger appeared, and Wizards of the Coast swoops in, buying D&D as a whole. And in the year 2000, with the release of 3rd edition, they announced something called Living Greyhawk. Now, Living Greyhawk really deserves its own video, and as I keep exploring, I'll probably end up making one or more. Essentially, for Living Greyhawk, adventures were created that took part in massive storylines. So adventures were sent out to all these different people around the globe, and it was part of a collective play. The results of these games would influence and change the Greyhawk setting moving forward. Now, probably because of Living Greyhawk, when 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons came out, the setting didn't make a transition. And in 5th edition, it had a few remastered Greyhawk adventures, but we never had a concrete setting book. But the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide brought Greyhawk back in with a small gazetteer and information on the setting. It's a great place to start looking into Greyhawk and cannibalizing it for your own setting. You can use what works and throw out what doesn't. This is the DM way. Now, I don't know for sure, but I think trying to take all of those Living Greyhawk changes and add them into the 2024 DMG was not a job anybody really wanted. So they ended up going back to much of what was presented in The World of Greyhawk from 1980, ignoring much, if not all, of the Living Greyhawk material. And so this begs the question, is it worth playing in Greyhawk? Is it worth knowing about the lore, even if it's all been retconned?
Is it worth it? Oh, yeah, it's worth it. If you're strong enough.
Well, subscribe to the channel as we attempt to answer those questions by looking at the history, both real and fantasy, of the world of Greyhawk. Thanks again, Tales of Fablecraft, for sponsoring this video. Please check out the link below for information on their virtual tabletop RPG game, and let me know if you're trying it out. If you live in the future, I'll put a playlist to all of the Greyhawk videos in the doobly-doo. Thank you, patrons, for keeping the lights on. If you're interested in becoming a patron, you can go to patreon.com/Jordan with a PH in the middle. And in the next video, I'm going to chat about creation myths and more fantasy history of the world of Greyhawk. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I will see you all in the next video.